So welcome everybody to our Sustainable Cities Network Climate and Resilience Work Group. I would like to introduce our speaker for today, who is McKenzie Jones. She is a Sustainability Manager for the City of Sedona, and she will be speaking to you all today on equitable climate action in Sedona. So welcome, McKenzie. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Anne. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah.
I am going to try to share my screen, which is always an adventure, and make sure this actually works. Okay, can everybody see it in presenter mode?
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little background on McKenzie. So she draws on her background in environmental policy to find innovative strategies to address climate change. She is formerly worked with the City of Flagstaff, where she oversaw sustainability planning on waste diversion policy, food policy, and natural areas. So I'm sure she is very familiar with the work that Jenny is doing at the City of Flagstaff as well. McKenzie began her career working above tree line for the Appalachian Mountain Club, which strengthens her understanding of conservation education, which I would love for you to say a little bit more about that. That sounds amazing. And she currently serves on boards of Oak Creek Watershed Council, Flagstaff Food Link, and Coconino Cooperative Extension. McKenzie holds a Bachelor of Arts in Government and Law from Lafayette College and a Master of Arts in Sustainable Communities from our wonderful higher educational partners up north, NAU. So very excited to have you talk about the City of Sedona's sustainability program. And also tell us some of the exciting developments you've had as far as your staff and changes. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Anne. I'm excited to be here, and I think the Sustainable Cities Network is such a valuable tool. I was joking with Jenny before the call started that we rely heavily on the work that Flagstaff did and that cities like Tempe, and sometimes you end up seeing some of the same materials, the same policies, things like that, because why reinvent the wheel? So thanks to SCN for having me here, and thanks to everyone who's let us steal your information in the past. Great. Well, so I'm McKenzie Jones. I am the Sustainability Manager for the City of Sedona. I've been in this role for just about 3 years, and I was hired to start the city's first sustainability program back in August of 2018. I know many of you living in Arizona are probably familiar with Sedona, but it's a pretty remarkable place, and it's been an exciting project to start the program. We understand here in Sedona just how valuable the natural environment is, and our community plan is focused on policies and actions by government and citizens that enhance our natural and built environments, create a diversified economy, improve individual and collective quality of life, and create an educated, equitable, and prosperous community. So we have really focused our efforts on that over the past few years. Excuse me. And so I'm going to talk a little bit today about our efforts internally as an organization to begin a sustainability program, and then our climate action planning efforts out in the community as well. So our vision for a sustainable Sedona includes healthy forests, thriving economy, secure water resources, multimodal transportation, renewable energy, zero waste, affordable housing, and resiliency for all neighborhoods. But we do feel like this sustainable Sedona is already facing threats. As we all know, since you're on this call, the climate is changing. Temperatures have already increased in the Verde Valley, and they're continuing to rise over the next several decades. And I think recently, we talk about climate change like it's an abstract thing. Sedona normally has about 8 days over 100 degrees per year, and last week we saw 5 in a row. We also had the Raphael fire, and have continued to see that flooding in northern Arizona throughout Flagstaff and the region in general. So compared to today, by 2050, we expect to have hotter temperatures, more severe drought, more intense storms, all the good stuff you all know about. Increased wildfire risk, which is a particular risk for us here in Sedona, because after the Paradise Fire, the Arizona Republic did that assessment of communities that were at risk of a deadly wildfire, and Sedona was off the charts, significantly more at risk than Paradise because of our really limited ingress egress. We only have 89 and 179. So it's very difficult to get people out of the community in the event of an emergency. And these changes for us mean, more insect-borne diseases, more extreme heat, more intense rainstorms. And then we saw our national forest close during the wildfires, which is pretty much the bulk of our economy. Is people come to Sedona, just to see the red rocks and to go out into the national forest. And so we are really at risk when the forests are closed. So we talked about that a little bit. What is at risk? Forest health and wildfire, our water supply, our land use and infrastructure, affordable housing. We've seen real challenges with affordable housing, just like everyone, but in particular in Sedona, we have, I think, about 1 in 10 homes is a short-term rental, and obviously our attempts to deal with this at the state level have not worked out well, and so we continue to see our extremely limited housing become even more limited. We also have challenges with public health and safety, food supply, and tourism and recreation as well. So when we started the program, we looked at a municipal sustainability plan for the organization that identified goals and objectives and actions. And we, of course, included representation throughout the whole organization. We have our deputy chief there, Stephanie Foley. I think anyone who works in a municipality knows that our police operations can be a really significant portion of our fuel consumption in the organization. And then we just last week adopted our first community-wide climate action plan. So we're very excited about that. And I know Gabe Desmond, our AmeriCorps sustainability specialist, is on the call, and I'm just going to give him a quick shout out for all of his work. He's been with us just a few months, but he really helped us get that across the finish line. So within our municipal sustainability plan, our organizational goals are to be resilient, to be carbon neutral, water smart, zero waste, to support our thriving municipal lands, and to also be a healthy workplace. And I think oftentimes people say, well, what can Sedona do about climate change? We're a town of 10,000 people, we're itty bitty. But we tend to think about our role as leading by example, demonstrating what's possible, sending market signals, and then supporting our residents with policies, education, and infrastructure, as well as centering equity in our work when we work with our community members. And I love the little cartoons from Sarah Lazarovic. Always does a great job of explaining just how incredibly difficult the work that we're doing is. I think we often focus on, individual action, and there's got to be some place in the middle of individual action and just completely rebuilding our society. So when we think about our efforts at the city level, we're focusing on energy. So just really basic, reducing energy consumption, increasing renewable energy generation. And we identified our actions include just really basic things. And this is for the small cities on the call, obviously, but establishing baseline energy use and targets, conducting facility upgrades, installing solar power on city property, and developing a green fleet policy. Some of our recent successes, we did do a big energy retrofit that has resulted in about 20% decrease in electricity use. Council adopted new building codes. The last time they'd been updated was 2006. So it was a pretty significant improvement for us to have provisions for solar and electric vehicle readiness. And then we constructed solar carports at City Hall. We also purchased our first all-electric city fleet vehicle and have now begun replacing several other vehicles with all-electric vehicles. And we have installed 6 public electric vehicle charging stations, which we didn't have any, and are now, we have another 8 on the way, including our first DC fast charging station. When we think about water, we're obviously thinking about reducing water consumption and then improving water quality. Again, just establishing baselines and conducting facility upgrades, updating our low flow toilet incentives, and then conducting staff trainings on best practices in green infrastructure and stormwater management. And it's just, again, some recent successes. We had a decrease of about 16% in water consumption, eliminated the use of Roundup in city operations. And then we've been partnering with Oak Creek Watershed Council on ongoing watershed cleanups and stormwater education throughout the community. And then our next section was waste. And we've aimed to prevent waste at large city events, compost our green waste from city operations, as well as develop a sustainable purchasing policy. We hosted our first Fix It clinic. We started hosting annual household hazardous waste events, and we've been installing water bottle refill stations throughout the community. And then from a resiliency perspective, we conducted our first community and municipal greenhouse gas inventories, and also partnered with NOAA to develop a climate profile for the Verde Valley, so that we really had a better understanding. And actually this was CLEMIS at the U of A, but more largely, I guess, or on a greater area scale, it was NOAA. And then our community-wide, so our focus had started out focusing on the organization. And after we established some of those internal targets, we really started working with the community on climate action planning. And we kicked off that process I think it was the first week of the pandemic. So our timing was excellent. And we had to essentially take our entire climate action planning process and make it virtual. So that's been a really interesting process. We've learned a lot about equitable virtual engagement. And like many plans, ours is focused on mitigation and adaptation. Our focus areas were transportation and land use, water and natural resources, community resiliency, waste and consumption, and buildings and energy. And our council community and advisory committee identified a target of a 50% reduction in community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And this was just based on the science and what we know to be true, that we need to try to keep it to 1.5 degrees. So this target is a recognition of what is necessary. And like many people, we are essentially building the plane as we try to fly it and figuring out exactly what will be necessary to get there. And we do understand, what is necessary, and that we need to obviously significantly reduce vehicle miles traveled. We get between 3 and 4 million visitors a year in our tiny little community. And that just has skyrocketed during the pandemic. We need to reduce building energy demand, increase renewable energy generation, increase the share of EVs on the road, and then reduce landfilled organic waste. And so our climate action plan prioritizes strategies and actions that ensure the inclusion of disadvantaged populations and promote equity in the distribution of benefits and burdens. What does that mean? In Sedona, according to Yavapai College, Hispanic community members make up about 15% of the population, and they are generally not represented in city planning processes at all. So During our climate action plan, we focused on engaging the immigrant community. We partnered with Northern Arizona Interfaith Council that had done a lot of work with the Sedona's immigrant community over the past decade and a half. And we received a grant to pay community organizers to do work with the community and essentially do civic academies. So we did a civic academy on climate change and what it meant. And then the way the process works, they utilize industrial areas foundation model of broad-based organizing, where the community members essentially identify the issues that most resonate with them. And then we do kind of additional work around those. So when they were identifying sort of general environmental barriers, the things that we heard were a need for home energy retrofits, including, just education and resources to save energy and water at home. We heard a lot about pedestrian infrastructure and safety in their neighborhood. And actually, I think we have a picture on the prior slide. This was from a site walk we did where cars come flying down the street pretty quickly. And there's kids playing in the neighborhood and everybody walking to and from, the bus and to the Quick Mart nearby and things like that. So it's just a really inadequate amount of, sidewalks and bike paths and things like that. So we did hear that. We heard about the need for transit for kids for after school programs. And that's something the city is actually working on right now, is launching our first community-wide transit system that would have trailhead shuttles with electric buses. And then we also heard about litter and bulk trash accumulation in the neighborhood. So in response to what we heard from the community, we hosted a cleanup event, a bulk trash event, and folks did, litter cleanup throughout the neighborhood, and we distributed LED light bulbs. And then we have done several site walks to identify where the best pedestrian infrastructure should go. And so we went and figured out sidewalks versus shared use paths and things like that. And we're actually putting that in our budget for next year to begin incorporating better sidewalks into that neighborhood so that people feel safer when they're walking. And we are also launching a home energy retrofit program that will start in this neighborhood, but is for the whole city, and is, we'll just do basic weatherization and with some additional rebates. So, so those are our big projects that we're working on. You see, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all may have.